Hello, everyone. Welcome to the King's Virtual Open House. Today we have Dr. Eunice Gorman with us today and Tracy, our student representative, to talk about our Thanatology program at King's. First, we're going to have a brief presentation, and then afterwards you'll have the chance to ask any questions that you may have. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation or in the Q&A session, please feel free to drop them in the chat function, and I will relay these questions to faculty and students as well. Without further ado, Eunice, over to you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Eunice. I am one of the professors in the program. And what we're going to do today is lead you through a brief set of PowerPoints. And then Tracy, who will introduce herself in a second, and I will be here for questions. Okay, so Tracy, over to you.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Tracy. I am a student at King's in the Thanatology department, and I just completed my 4th year. I will be returning for a 5th year, completing the honors specialization in Thanatology, as well as the certificate in grief, loss, and bereavement studies.
Great. Thanks, Tracy. So if we could start then, please, Aziz. So, what is Thanatology? We are really reluctant to talk about death, and poor Death here, as you can see, needs a hug, feels misunderstood. Next one, please, Aziz. So this on your right-hand side is the Handbook of Thanatology. It's one of the books that of many that have been published over the last 50 or 60 years. And really, thanatology is the study of death. It started here at King's in the late 70s, and it really has expanded from just talking about death to talking about loss, change, transition, palliative care, counseling skills, extraordinary experiences, end of life, and many other topics. Next, please. So, as you know, anybody who's lived a life knows that there are often upsets or changes or losses or transitions, good, bad, or kind of mixed, that hit us as we go through life. And sadly, we don't spend a lot of time talking about grief. Next, please. So here are some examples of losses that we would look at in thanatology that are not related to death. For those of you who think, oh my gosh, that sounds really, really depressing. It really is very much about life and coping with the kinds of disappointments or shifts that can cause us some heartache. You can see the little girl at the bottom waving to the moving truck, the fellow at the top, I'm assuming, I like to believe he's going off to King's to study something, and he's got his pack and he's headed for the bus or the train. And then we have the breakup of a relationship, which many of you have sadly experienced, and you know how tough that can be. Next, please. So, when you experienced those losses or those changes or those transitions, how did people around you respond? How did you feel? Did you feel prepared? And how have those experiences shaped you as a person? Often we think about really happy times and how they shape us, but in fact, sometimes sad times or crises can have a big role to play in who we become and what interests us. And certainly people who study thanatology are often people who are interested in grief and loss because they have themselves had things happen to them where they really did well, they were resilient, and now they hope to be able to return the favor and support other people. Next, please. So, but in our society, that's not so easy because people are really terrified to talk about death, and they really want us to kind of move on, get over it, find another partner, get another cat, you're young, you can always have more children. Those are the kinds of things that people say, or don't wallow. You need to get out more. You need to move on. Get back to your life as soon as possible. You need to take control here. And so what happens is, in our fast-paced society, people very quickly kind of forget the people who are grieving, whether it's a death or a disappointment. Next, please. So change, transition, loss, change is a constant in our life. And I used to say before I had a child that nobody over about the age of 12 likes to change, but in truth, probably nobody over the age of about 6 months likes to change. It's a struggle. It calls for new coping skills. So we're not often prepared for those kinds of changes in our life and things that take away our control. Or, you know, we have messages in society that talk about closure, which of course does not exist. When you are sad about something, or you lose something important to you, or you lose an important relationship through a death, that loss comes to define us in many ways, and it's something that we carry with us for the rest of our lives. Next, please. So here we have thanatology, where we do talk about these difficult subjects. We do talk about loss and death, and we become more comfortable talking about the whole range of life, from birth right through to death, and in fact, after death, bereavement and grief for those we leave behind. And we talk about grief in ways that make it very, very normal. That change and loss and transition are absolutely normal, and grief is a healthy, adaptive thing that we all do when we've had a disappointment or a loss or a death. And many of us can connect to other people through the losses that we have shared. In fact, we know in bereavement and grief theories that one of the biggest indicators of how people are going to do over the long term is social support, or that bond, that common bond that brings us together. Next, please. So people will say, well, if you said to your parents, you know, I'd really like to study thanatology, and they say, what? How will you ever be employed? This is always the bottom line, and, you know, instead of valuing education for just education. So thanatology is linked to so many subjects. What are the big forces in our life? Love, grief, birth, death. So you cannot pick up a book or listen to music without hearing themes about loss and grief. And certainly economics, health sciences, social justice and peace studies here at King's are linked to thanatology. There's overlap with religion, with ethics. Certainly for people who have an interest in psychology and sociology, there is an overlap. We have many students from criminology and history and other topics that take thanatology, maybe not as their major, but certainly as electives. And of course, medicine, nursing, anything to do with illness or chronic illness or recovery from an injury is related to thanatology, as is the law. Next, please. So in thanatology, we have a number of ways to enter into the program. You can be in the certificate program, which is under review at the moment in concert with Fanshawe College. We have a minor, a major, and an honors specialization in thanatology. Many people combine a double minor or a double major. Often things that fit together nicely are things like thanatology and psychology, thanatology and social justice. Many social work students take thanatology electives. So there's a lot of overlap. Anybody who's interested in disability studies, they're often open to taking thanatology electives. Next, please. So we are Thanatology is part of the Department of Interdisciplinary Programs. And just as I said, there's a lot of overlap or certainly discussion and communication between these departments. These are the departments that live under our umbrella of interdisciplinary programs. So along with thanatology, or the study of change, transition, loss, death, is disability studies, childhood and social institutions, and social justice and peace studies. Next, please. So the kinds of courses that are offered, and please, feel free to ask Tracy or myself questions about these courses. But just to give you an idea, we have obviously an introduction to thanatology. We look at grief counseling, suicide, and other traumatic losses, palliative care or end-of-life care, children and death, and of course children grieve very differently than adults. They are not little people, they are children. Social justice and diversity in grief and loss, bereavement and grief theory. So looking at that basically from 120 or so years ago, right up into the modern day, and how that has evolved, how we look at grief and loss and how that's evolved. Change, transition, and loss, which is a course that looks at all grief not related to death. So divorce, disability, death of a dream, the breakup of a relationship, unemployment. Creative responses to grief and loss, that's looking at art therapy and group work and music therapy and all kinds of other ways of supporting people who have sustained a loss in their life. Trauma and grief, which looks at traumatic elements of grief and traumatic losses. Social and political discourse, of course, research methods, because many students who take thanatology go on to grad school to apply to social work or to counseling, psychology, or to other programs. Many students who are interested in Teachers College take the Children in Death course and some of the other courses, because of course they're going to run into children who are grieving, either because they have a classmate who's ill, or they've lost a pet, or they have grandparents or parents or a sibling who's ill, or there's a teacher, or they themselves are ill. Extraordinary Experiences in Dying, Death, and Bereavement is a new course that we just started this year, which looks at things that are unusual before death, at the time of death, and after death. So we talk about people going to mediums and seeing their loved one at the end of their bed, or having dreams about their loved one. Then we have a practicum course where you can go out into the field and see how thanatology works, and what kinds of jobs and careers have an overlap. So going to a funeral home, going to a palliative care unit. And then of course we have personal and professional issues, not the least of which is, how do I do this kind of work over the long term? Next, please. So people who study thanatology, even just as a couple of electives, not even a minor, major, or honor specialization, can work in many of these different areas, or can really add so much to discussions in healthcare and hospice care. And MAID there, of course, stands for Medical Assistance in Dying, long-term care facilities, funeral planning, spiritual care, people who work in emergency first responders, certainly counselors and social workers, and many of the other people that you see there as well. Next, please. So what we do is not really just look at death. We look at what's important in life and death through exploring about that, discussing it, learning, growing. We try to be very creative in the program, using lots of video clips and movies and other ways of engaging ourselves as the people teaching, but also the people learning, because we're in this together. Next, please. So one of the things we know in thanatology and something that becomes clearer as you study it is that every moment is precious and every life is precious. Next, please. So we have a Facebook page. If you're interested in looking for more information, it's King's University College Thanatology when you search on Facebook. And then I have a Twitter account that I run for the program as well. It might be something you want to visit to see, because we're always posting things, students and faculty alike, and people from the community. The Facebook page has 700 plus members. The Twitter feed has about 17 or 1800. And so there's lots of sharing of information, what's in the news, what people are writing about. So you might want to look at that in between now and making your decision or starting in the fall. Next, please. So we have a little cartoon here of Death with his long black gown and his very giant scythe. And he says in therapy, he's on the couch, says, let's set aside the role of bringer of death and chat about your desire to dance. So there is some levity and some humor in the study of death and dying. We take it very, very seriously, but we also have to be cognizant that these are tough topics. And we try to be incredibly supportive of our students for that reason. So I will leave it at that and see if there are any questions, or and certainly please feel free to ask Tracy questions. She's a student and she's living it, and students are often the best people to talk to as opposed to me. So
Thank you so much. So I ask everybody who's attending this session, if you have any questions, feel free to type them up in the chat. So far, I do have quite a few questions lined up for you. However,
okay.
I would like to ask Tracy about her experience in the program. Tracy, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of fell into thanatology kind of randomly, to be honest. At the time when I entered university, thanatology actually wasn't offered as a first-year course. The introductory course was a second-year course. And they have since changed that since they opened up the honor specialization. And I struggled a lot in first year, I'm not gonna lie. I was taking courses that I didn't enjoy. And so when it came to choosing a major, I had never taken a thanatology course in my life and was just like, sure, why not? It sounds interesting. So I declared my major as thanatology and I ended up loving it. So thankfully, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't like it, but that's kind of how I ended up there, and I absolutely love it. I definitely get mixed reactions when I tell people what I study. They kind of give me a weird look. It's nice when people are curious and they ask, but there's always the occasional person that just kind of changes the subject, like, I don't want to talk to you. But I try to kind of explain to people that we don't study dead people or anything like that. It's more, we really look at grief and loss and the different types of losses that you can experience in a lifetime. And as Eunice said, that's death and non-death losses. I think a lot of people don't necessarily see certain life experiences as losses, but from a thanatological lens, you know, looking at the current state of the world right now with the pandemic, like, that's a huge loss, and we're all experiencing lots of losses because of that. So it's nice to be able to look at that from that perspective. So yeah, and I can speak to a lot of the courses too if you have any questions. I've taken most of them at this point. And yeah, the class sizes are so small. You really get to know the faculty, which it really makes for, I want to say, a unique university experience. I know quite a few larger programs, especially at like Western Main campus and such. I know they have hundreds and hundreds of people in their classes, which makes it very difficult to, you know, get to know the people in your classes and your professors, TAs, for example. Whereas I know most of my profs very well. We're kind of on a first name basis. And when you get to those upper year courses, such as like the fourth year courses, there's only 10 people in the class. It's very small. It's treated more as like a seminar where there's a lot of discussion, and it's really quite enjoyable. So even if you're not sure if you want to major in it or anything like that, I would absolutely encourage you to try the introductory course.
Perfect. Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I also have another follow-up question for you from one of our students who are attending the session today, and they're asking if you have a plan for your career after graduating.
No, I don't have a concrete plan, but I have some ideas. I would definitely like to continue on to do grad school. I did complete the research methods course and the seminar courses that are kind of required for graduate school. So I'm leaning towards social work due to the options that it provides. Social work is very broad, so I could end up in a lot of different environments. I've also considered child life as another option as well, which there is a graduate program at McMaster, which is very competitive and very difficult to get into. And I say I'm leaning more towards social work, again, because of the options. If you choose child life, you're doing child life. That's kind of it. So, but I would like to potentially work in a hospital. That's kind of my goal. I'd really like to work with children and families. Yeah, that's kind of my interests.
Perfect. Thank you, Tracy. I also have another question that came in for both of you. What is there any other experiential learning opportunities beyond the Practicum course?
Tracy, did you want to answer that?
Yeah. So there's actually quite a bit of experiential learning throughout the program. For example, in the third year grief counseling course, we actually it's not so much you're not going out into the field or anything like that, but you do a lot of practice in a sense. So in that particular class, we were able to do what we call triads and dyads. So we'd get into pairs or trios, and we would do like mock grief therapy stuff. So one person, if you were in a triad or triad, sorry, there would be one person that would watch, one person who would serve as like the counselor, and another person who would share, depending on what it was. So it gives a really awesome practice to that. Obviously, I am by no means a grief counselor or a professional at this point after taking that, but it really dips your toe into that. We also have some really awesome courses that have weekend workshops. So it allows you, so they're online, they're like 8-week online courses with a 2-day weekend workshop where you go in and you get to do different activities and stuff. So Eunice touched on the creative responses course, which I took, and that had a weekend workshop, and we'd go in and we would experiment with these different artistic therapies. So we did some collage work, we did poetry, we did a lot of different stuff. And Carrie Arnold is the professor for that particular course, and she often tells us that you can't really ask like a client, for example, to do these things without, trying them out yourself. So I think that's also a very unique experience as well. And then I can speak on the Practicum as well, which is a really awesome course. I had the opportunity to take it this past semester. Unfortunately, it was cut short due to COVID-19, but we spent about 6 weeks going to different community support facilities around the city, and kind of getting a feel for what everybody does, what all of these different organizations do for the community within thanatology. And then we get to go and do a 45-hour placement. And I was able to complete about half of my hours in the Parkwood Palliative Care Unit, which was really awesome. I got to go in and speak with families and patients and help out with the nursing staff and physical therapy and that sort of stuff, which was really awesome. So that is a 3rd-year course, which I would definitely recommend if you're interested.
The other thing, thank you so much, Tracy. That's awesome. See, I told you, students are much more important to have in these meetings. The other really interesting thing is we have a super active thanatology student club, and they are always putting on events. So visits to funeral homes. They had a medium come in once. They have done tours of things. They have done ghost walks. They have brought in films. So there's all kinds of experiential things. They usually have a meeting at once a month, but they're constantly giving out information about things that are going on in London or in nearby areas if students are willing to travel a little bit. So aside from all the great things that Tracy talked about, there really is quite a presence. The students are very, very active in their club. So that's another way of getting some experiential learning.
Yes, and I actually also just remembered, going off of that, Carrie Arnold, who I mentioned previously, she also has a what we call the WAS lab, which is a research lab. So if you're into research and that sort of stuff, it's a great opportunity to kind of dip your toe into kind of exploring avenues of research, get involved with some research projects, bounce ideas off of your peers. I really enjoy it, and this is coming from somebody who wasn't all that into research like a year ago, and now I'm completely into it. So it's kind of something different as well that you can get involved in.
Great.
Thank you so much. So I have another question in the chat. So somebody who's trying to grieve the loss of their significant other, what kind of courses do you recommend within the Thanatology program for them to take?
So someone's trying to deal with the loss of a significant other?
Yes.
Okay, so there are a couple of ways of answering this. The first way is that there is a caveat at the beginning of every single course that if you have recently suffered a loss, that you may think about either getting support during the time that you're in the course or maybe delaying the course. But having said that, very few of us have gotten to this stage of our life without having a significant loss. So one of the courses, they all, of course, have a component of how to and what if and listening skills and communication skills, even the courses that are not labeled counseling as such. One of the most highly prescribed courses, I would say, is a second-year course on bereavement theories and interventions, which is kind of like an overview of how we've gotten to 2020 and had our thinking developed about grief and bereavement and how we might then support people. So kind of an overview of interventions. Then, of course, Tracy talked about the creative responses, which has all kinds of ways of expressing yourself, because of course we talk about groups, we talk about one-to-one counseling, but there are lots of people that would not go to a group and would feel much more comfortable doing artwork or poetry or journaling. So there are, I think every course has a tremendous benefit to it. But for someone who's who's really trying to nail down maybe why they feel the way they feel or the kind of nuts and bolts of grief, the bereavement theories and interventions is probably a good start. And in fact, that is often an elective that social work, people who want to go into social work take, because it is kind of an overarching look at bereavement, at grief.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we also have another question from a student. They're asking if they take a 3-year or a 4-year degree, how much does it affect their experience in the program?
That's a good question, because I wasn't aware that you could do a 3-year degree. I know you can at Western, but we kind of operate on a 4-year cycle. So I guess the really interesting courses that Tracy has talked about, the seminar series, the research study, the research courses, those are in 4th year. And of course, in 4th year, you can think about making your research course part of kind of an independent study or using the loss lab. So I honestly don't know if I can answer that, because I've always assumed that we work on a 4-year cycle. Maybe can
it
help
might
us
be,
figure that out.
yeah, it might be a better question in terms of differentiating between a third and fourth, 3-year and a 4-year degree. That might be a better question for like the academic dean's office. I know for thanatology specifically, a lot of the courses do have prerequisites. So in order to take quite a few of the 2nd-year courses, I do believe you need the introduction and so on. As for it's hard to say. The 4th-year courses aren't required unless you're doing an honors specialization. So I was required to do them because that's my module. But if you're just doing a major, you're not required to take any of the 4th-year courses. You can finish with the 3-year courses and you're good to go. But I'm not 100% sure the details about a 3-year degree. You could potentially take the 4th-year courses in your 3rd year, I suppose, if you wanted to, but I do believe you need to have the prerequisites down for that.
Perfect, thank you. Another question we had is that if you can explain a little bit more about the Loss Lab and what it is.
Yes, absolutely. There is information I know on the Thanatology website. I'll try my best to go off the top of my head. Especially we haven't done it in quite a few months, especially with COVID. But essentially, what Dr. Arnold has done is she created a small group. She has quite a few research projects on the go. So part of it is, getting us into doing research and creating new projects, but also to kind of help her a little bit with ongoing projects. I can't really give too many details. A lot of it is kind of confidential in a sense. But yeah, it's just exploring different research opportunities. So I know we were discussing potentially starting a research project that looked at grief in university students. Which there isn't a lot of research that's been done in Canada. So what we do is we often come up with an idea and then we'll split apart and we'll go ahead and do kind of our own research of what's already been done. A big thing in research is that, you don't want to do something that's already been done a billion times over because nobody's going to want to read it. So you want to find that gap in the current research that's been conducted. And once you find that gap, you can kind of create your own. And it's just a really awesome opportunity to, again, just kind of dip your toe into research, see if it's something that you like. As I mentioned before, I really wasn't all that interested in research a couple of years ago. The idea of taking a research methods course really sounded like pulling teeth, to be honest, but I took it and I actually really loved it. And it made me more interested. I find, especially when you're passionate about something, it kind of makes you want to contribute a little bit more to that. So with the research and stuff, I feel like I'm always coming up with different ideas. So yeah, I think the Loss Lab is a really awesome opportunity to bounce those ideas off of your peers, off of a professional who has done research and has publications and such. And yeah, kind of work collaboratively. That's another big thing in the program, and especially when you get to the upper year courses, it's a lot of collaboration and discussion. So I hope that answers your question. Again, there is a more concrete description about it on the Thanatology page on the King's website, but that's just kind of what's been of my experience so far.
Right. I have one last question, and it's also for Tracy. The question is, how do you manage your, personal and extracurricular life with your academic life? How do you balance both of them?
For sure. That's a great question. So yeah, I work. I do probably anything that any university student does, but it's a lot of time management, to be honest. You have to, you just have to be able to acknowledge what you can do, I think is really important. I spent the first part of my university career basically beating myself up because it can be a difficult adjustment. I'm definitely one that will admit that I struggled a lot, and especially my first year. And it's just, again, finding that balance. So for me personally, I am considered a full-time student, but I don't take the full course load. So a typical school year would be 5 courses per semester. That could be a full year course or a half year course. I take 4 per semester. That's why I'm taking a 5th year. I need the extra time to finish because I do better doing that. My grades reflect that, and my mental health reflects that. And I find I have more time for myself, and I have more time to complete the work that I need to do. Personal preference, I know lots of people who manage really well doing 5 courses a semester. I also, I work at King's when it's open. I'm in a work study position, which is really awesome. King's employs quite a few students a year, which involves about 15 hours a week. And a lot of the time when it's quiet, and I can't speak for other positions, but I'm often able to do schoolwork while I work, which is really nice as well. So that helps significantly. I don't currently have any like major extracurricular activities. I was on the King's has a women's flag football team, so I was on that for a couple of years, which was fun. Yeah, I feel like I'm gonna sound like a bit of a broken record at this point, but it's a lot of time management. But you know, not beating yourself up when you are, you know, maybe having a bit of a hard time getting everything done, and just trying your best to manage things the best you can, and maybe admitting when you're struggling a little bit. And King's also has some really awesome resources as well. There's if you're concerned, they do have a learning lab program through the accessibility office, so you can meet with peers and or a learning specialist to kind of help guide your way on doing that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Tracy did a great job. I just wanted to mention, sorry, Aziz, I just wanted to mention, Tracy's absolutely right. You have to not beat yourself up. King's is, I think, really excellent. They have a wellness program, they have yoga, they have academic advisors who are incredibly supportive. And because King's is small and our classes tend to be small, and as Tracy said, you do get to know your faculty member quite well. And you get to know other students very well. So you get support from one another. And if the wheels are falling off a little bit and you do need a little bit of extra time with something, I think that it's a very different experience if your class has 35 people in it than if it has 1,200. So, so I think that King's really does understand that being a student is tough, and that juggling work, as Tracy said, and life, and maybe wanting to exercise or meet a friend when we are able to meet friends again, you want to do all those things as well as do well in school. So we have The Right Place, which is a fabulous program that helps people to figure out how to write academic papers, and supports you with that, going over drafts. The library staff is amazing. So I think that there are many, many supports in place to help you be successful. We want you to be successful and to have a really good experience.
Great, thank you. At this point, we don't have any more questions. I just wanted to bring it back to you and see if you have any final advice for our future students.
Well, actually, as you were talking, Eunice, I came up with another, potentially some more practical advice. I feel like I kind of rambled and got off tangent there for a second, but I think any practical advice that I would give to you guys coming in would be, well, organization when it comes to schoolwork is very important. I would consider myself to be a fairly organized person. I keep track of everything I need to get done in a week in my calendar, and I will often make lists of what I need to accomplish in a day to ensure I get stuff done on time. So that's a big thing for me. Personally, I have friends who have really detailed planners like on paper and stuff. I do the computer thing. It's kind of up to you. But yeah, so if I have something due on a Monday and I have a week to do that, but I also have readings, I will kind of put, okay, Monday I need to get this, this, and this done. And then Tuesday I need to get this, this, and this done. And then that'll give me X number of days to work on this assignment. But also, again, I give myself a little bit of lenience with that. I'm the worst one for telling myself I need to get something done on a particular day, and then I won't do it. So again, yeah, it's just a matter of knowing when stuff is due and just finding a way to kind of get it done, I guess. That's not helpful whatsoever, but
that is very helpful, I think. And I think
I was going to say something else, but I don't remember.
Oh, sorry, I probably cut you off on that. Your thought was there and I lost it for you. The other thing is that every week, I think most profs every week do a check-in. How are you doing? Do you remember that there's a book review due in 2 weeks? Are you having any trouble getting the book? Have you looked at the book review guidelines? There are all kinds of things that are made available to you to help you. And I always start off by talking about my biggest mistake starting university was, oh, I'm away at school. This is so exciting. This is so much fun. And I don't think I cracked a book for, the first few weeks, and I paid for that. So I tell, and because of my gray hair, people either think I'm wise or I'm incredibly cranky and not useful at all. I always tell them, please, please, please do not wait till Thanksgiving weekend to start school. Yes, you can still have fun. You can go to orientation. You can meet people. You can participate in clubs week. You can do everything. But you also have to start your schoolwork because it helps with your mental health to not be panic stricken, to not be anxious. So, but again, because the faculty gets to know you, we're going to constantly help you walk through the term. Okay, well, our first assignment is due now. We have reading week. I know I want you to have fun on reading week, get some well-deserved rest and relaxation, but do remember 2 weeks after reading week, you have your second assignment due. So again, we're trying to walk you through in a way, again, so that you're successful.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, so at this point, we don't have any more questions. I would like to thank you, Eunice and Tracy, for your time. We really, really appreciate it. And I'd also like to thank everybody who's attended this call. If you have any questions for any of us, please feel free to email us at kings@uwo.ca, and I'll make sure to forward your questions. But at this time, thank you for being here, and hopefully we will see you in person in the near future.
Yes, thank you so much for coming, everybody. And thank you, Tracy. You were awesome.
Perfect. Have a wonderful day.